Gopal, and I'm very happy because quite number of them happen to be my former students.
Okay. I also noticed that.
Oh yeah, sorry, your bilateral discussions going on. Sorry, I'm back.
Oh yes.
Good, good. Anyway, it must be what, about 4 o'clock there.
Uh,
Going to
yes,
report.
it is 3:51.
Yeah. Good.
I didn't leave my chair because my wife gave me coffee, so I'm continuously in my chair. I have to take a break.
Good for you. I used to have to refill something, so I have to go and had an apple. त्यही त प्लस के अरे मेरो हाम्रो फ्यामिलीमा जुठो लागेर काकाको एकजना छोरा खस्यो हो सो आई हैड बीन मोर्निङ अनि अब यो भर्खर यो 16/7 सकियो अनि बाबा आमाको तिथि गर्नु थियो हो so it's all coming together, you know, so I'm busy till Thursday. हाम्रो बोर्डको मिटिङ थर्सडे हो आज र भोलि यो भइहाल्यो थर्सडे वी हेभ अ बोर्ड मिटिङ very short one. Then I'm going to take it a little easy. Actually, first you are coming back in the first week of November. When?
Yes. I'll join the office only in the second week.
Okay. आएपछि भेटौँ न एकखेप. Let's meet once when you come back.
यो macroeconomics यस्तो खालको इस्युजहरु एकखेप भेला गरेपछि खासमा bigger audience in Bhutan like दियो भने this is more of informative and more in the training session चाहिँ राम्रो छ हुन्छ जस्तो लाग्यो मलाई यो कति त आफूले पनि भेला नगरिकन भन्नु सकिँदैन कि
हुँदैन. No, we'll do it Soros from CRB as we'll do it. त्यही हो अलिकति अब हामी पनि you know यता उता के गरेर I mean it's coming up. त्यही हो अहिले हाम्रो दुईटा केटा we have added to help Saroj. But Saurabh wants to take a backstage, so we have to get an ED by the beginning of the year. Besides with the pro bono dinais in the service. So he wants to help, but more as a researcher, and we are on the lookout. If you know somebody who would even give you know, sort of alikati ke bhanne contribution with the honorariums type of thing, त्यस्तो कोही छ भने तपाई भन्नुहोस् न. त्यस्तो पनि खोजेको हामीले. त्यस्तो पनि खोजेको हो, you know, some people who can do it. Okay. Shoaib. Even छोडे क्या?
Yes, Mr. Bhandari.
Yeah, Shoaib. Now, you know, we have holidays coming up first week of October. So please don't plan anything for me. Are there anything happening in the first week?
For this time, there is no schedule in the first week of October.
Okay.
But please mention the specific. Please let me know the specific dates when Bhutan has holidays in October. Okay, so I'll certainly avoid those days.
Yeah. No, remember that email I sent to Nihal is there.
Yes.
Okay. If you look at my email that I sent to
Nihal. Yes, I'll check again the email. Mr. Bhandari, it is 11:55.
Sorry? Can you repeat that, Sohaib?
Mr. Bhandari, it is 11:55 a.m.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Bhutan Standard Time.
Yeah. Okay, yes. All right. Thank you. All right. I hope our participants are again back at their seats in front of their laptop or desktop or mobile. um, it's 5 to 12. So we want to start the next the second part of Dr. Kharka's presentation, and we'll have good time for discussion after that. Damar, could you continue and try to complete in about 35 minutes? Then we'll leave the rest for
Okay.
question and answers. All right.
Sure, sir, sure.
Okay, Damar, you have the floor.
Thank you. Shoaib, can you upload the presentation? We can go down straight to the second session now.
Yes, we can go to the second session. Yes.
Okay. I'm very happy to welcome back the participants, those who have attended the first session. The second session, as I promised in the beginning, will be more to do with those macroeconomic variables that are going to be impacted by the monetary policy. Now, in that, I have covered the monetary analysis, focus on asset quality and NPL issues, inflation issues, foreign exchange reserves issues, and the fiscal and monetary sides prospects and challenges. Then I have also discussed a little bit on the regional economic integrations, addressing to some of the common issues like poverty, that in our case, I guess, how do we address to that also? And then I will have some of my thoughts and conclusions, but I would like the participants to draw your conclusions and then bring certain issues for discussion that time. Can I go for the next slide? So if we, let's look at the data. What does the reserve data say? Now, when we look at it, and we also in Bhutan have a constitutional requirement to meet at least 1 years of import of essential goods with the reserves, that much of reserves should be there in our system. The reserves used to be quite comfortable in the past, covering about 24, 25 months of over 2 years of import requirement. Now, during the COVID and in the recent months, it has come down. And the latest report, the data released, I don't know whether it is a very correct figure or I got it wrong from the wrong source. Please, I will stand corrected. If there are colleagues from Royal Monetary Authority, please correct me, because I also found that the foreign exchange reserve has shrunk to a level of 970 million, so less than a billion, end of December. And it was 1.46 in April last year, 2021. But in July 2022, it has come down to 970, which would barely cover for about 14 months. If this is a correct figure that I have picked up, I say that I stand corrected, then we need to be little careful in our foreign exchange reserves. Now, when you talk about foreign exchange reserves, we talk both Indian currency and the convertible currency together. But we also have a system of segregating these two, because Indian currency is very important for us in terms of our import, because as I said, 82% of our business is happening, our trade is happening with India. Very close to 90% of our imports come from there. That's why we categorize these two baskets differently. Now, again, it is also important for us to categorize these two into foreign currency into two baskets, because the sources would be a little different. And but two put together now from 1.4, it has come down, and little bit a matter of concerns, but RMA has been putting a lot of policy measures in place. And one very noticeable one is on a very recent one on restriction on, or at least temporary restrictions on import of non-productive assets, I would like to call it. Like vehicles import was one of the areas that was taking a very high amount of foreign currency out. And once the vehicle import was very high, it also called for import of increase in the import of fuel, and that was the very high contributor to the draining down of the foreign reserves. And I will also discuss later on the sources. Can I go to the next slides? Now, the other thing that also helps us build up our foreign currency reserves is the foreign direct investment. This has not been seeing the growth. In fact, from 19 to 21 data, this July data, it is showing a gradual decline in the foreign direct investment. And this could be also the impact of the COVID, I guess, because none of the new projects that would attract the foreign direct investment had happened during this period. And this has pulled down the foreign currency reserves also. Next slide, please. I will go very fast in this slide transitions, because I will like to finish it in half an hour or 35 minutes so that we can have more time for discussions. Now, the very important contributor to our foreign exchange is the tourism. Tourism during this difficult time was hit it got the worst hit. The hardest hit was seen by the tourism sector. Now, tourism sector employs quite a lot of people, and it also, because unemployment figures that we have seen growing that in the earlier presentation was also because of this, because tourism sector was almost at a complete halt, and that has really affected the revenue by very hugely. And in even 2020, as per the data that I have found, only 28 million people have visited Bhutan, only generating $19 million, whereas earlier figures used to be over 200 millions. Now, if you combine both all kinds of regionals and external tourism, I guess, so this is what the data say. But the tourism overall contributions in Bhutan is quite substantial. It's very close to 4% of the GDP. But with the reopening of the international tourism from 23rd September, which happened very recently, I'm sure gradually this will start picking up, and then we'll have better contributions from this sector. Next slide, please. Now, as a percentage of the GDP, and comparing and the comparisons with other countries in the region, if we look at our own contributions to the GDP, this line that shows gradually has come down, and this is up to 2018 only, but it has suddenly come down and touched almost to the base in 2020 and 2019 because of the COVID. These contributions of tourism sector to GDP was almost nil. And these other countries, if you look at their contributions of the tourism income to their GDP, some of them are very, like Sri Lanka is also one country that depended, their contribution to GDP is very high. But in the region, if we really look at Maldives, is one country from where we can draw lessons, where their income is contribution to GDP is very, very high. It is 28% of the GDP, and their GDP is about 4.9 billion, I guess, dollars. And a small country, very comfortably placed in terms of economic fundamentals, and very strong in the tourism sector. And there is also some lessons probably in the regions we can learn from them as to how the contribution of tourism can be enhanced in other countries. If you look at Nepal, Nepal is also quite high. Of course, Nepal's tourism got hit during the pandemic also, but in terms of the percentage of the contribution, Nepal is also quite high. And then Bhutan, as I said, the base of the GDP itself is low. That's why the percentage comes a little higher. Let's go to the next. Well, if we look at the regional tourism income distribution pattern in the figures more closely here, you can see Maldives leading with the GDP and their tourism income, and then the percentage of contributions. Now, India's overall GDP, as we say, is a very huge one. Is as for the figure that I got, it's 2.6 trillion, and they generate about close to 7 billion income from the tourism, contributing about 4.7%. And I'm sorry, this is not 6.6. I think it is 66. The tourism income of India is 60. Probably I have put the decimal in the wrong place. I don't know. No, I think it is correct. 6.6. And Thailand, if you look at it, $500 billion economy, $505.98 billion, but their tourism income is very high, and it also gets contributed about contributes about 15% now. Similarly, if you look at Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, we have a quite substantial amount of contributions from tourism sector, and this sector has been the worst hit during the pandemic. And now, but some countries have started picking up quite fast, like Thailand has started picking up in the tourism income quite fast, and so is Maldives. But the rest of us in the regions are a little behind in terms of picking up the income from tourism sector. The next slide, please.
Dambar, which year data is this, please?
Data is 20, but basically this data comes from 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the other contributor of foreign remittance to foreign exchange in Bhutan comes from foreign remittance. Foreign remittance plays a significant role. In fact, 83.4 million, that was in 2020, again contributing equal to tourism sector. That's tourism sector is 3.6% of GDP, whereas remittance is also 3.46%. So it is as important as tourism sector for Bhutan, the foreign remittance. And in fact, some other countries have much more strength in terms of remittance from their nationals working abroad. And in Bangladesh, their contribution to GDP is 6.7%, very high. In India, it is 3.17 for big economy. And then I've also given the absolute figure there. And Sri Lanka is very high, 8.8%. Pakistan is also quite high. And Nepal is very, very high compared to their GDP percentage. What happened? And if we look at it, more than 60% of the foreign exchange inflow comes from remittance in Nepal. And in Bhutan, it is 3.46. Now, we also talk about when this foreign currency inflow happens, we are also worried about you see people moving out and brain drain happening. Now, this is one issue where we have to really discuss further. Is now what happens when these remittance start growing up? We also see more people going out, earning there and sending money back home. If this continues, this is not a bad trend. But if remittance does not come in, whereas the people moving out continuously goes up, then you might be losing the people, whereas your uh, remittance is not happening. So there are issues that we need to discuss. But again, this also need to be addressed or discussed in the face of how is the employment situations in the country itself. So there are a lot of connected variables that we need to discuss, put together. Uh, no, the slide has gone out. Can I show it?
Yes.
Let's go. Let's go
Yes.
down to.
Please give me 10 seconds. Just.
In Bhutan, we also have issues of people going abroad, and it has been now. Uh, we have also started seeing some of the write-up in the newspapers that Bhutanese going to Canada, going to Australia is on a increase, and a lot of important sectors are getting hurt because the people are moving out, and basically the people who are well trained and contributing in the country, their migrations or out migrations is going to affect critical services, and worried. But also when we see the remittance, then we also see this as same as exporting goods and exporting services, equally important. So when we are limited with exporting of goods and earning foreign exchange, then exporting of services also needs to be considered, but it has to be managed well so that people going out bring in foreign exchange, whereas they also bring in experience and comebacks. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the foreign reserves and some of the contributors to the foreign reserves, then I get to the monetary side and the credit creation side, because these are some of the aspects that will impact the overall income uh, in the future or even near future, medium term, depending on the what kind of policies, whether it's restrictive or liberal policies we are adapting to when it comes to monetary policies. Now, if you look at M2, which is the money supply, basically, it's a broad money supply. It's called, these people in the economic front or RMA colleagues will really no, will have no problem. But M2 basically we can say is a money supply. Now the yellow bars are the indicators of money supply, and the blue bars are basically the credit going to the private sector. Now, in the recent years, we see this money supply growth little restrictive or coming down. The growth is coming down in a sense like it used to be like I have also seen about 4-5 years ago 24-25% going almost up to 30% of the money M2 growth year on year, but it is coming down, and the coming down of M2 is dependent on the monetary policy. And it is also good when there is an inflation control needs to be done. This has to come down. But bringing this down also would have restrictions to the growth, as credit creations would be limited because of these aspects. But credit creations also depends on a lot of other variables, depending on how well are we placed in terms of our NPL and the ground for business growth. So we'll look into these aspects in the next slides. But overall, I think the money is growing about 15%. But even in this difficult time, the private sector credit, given the money supply, has been quite okay, about 15% or so. But in the heat of the pandemic session, it has really come down to about 6-7%. Like once it was 6.9%, and then other time it came down to 10.5%. Let's go to the next. Can you go to the next? Now, these are the growth changes in the private sector. If you look at it, how has the credit creations been, growing in the private sector? These are the bars that month-wise. Now, if you see from June 12 to June 21, then you will see it was initially it was quite 12, it's very high, gone down, and then remained quite stagnant, and then picked up, and then gone down again. Now, this credit, again, when you look at it, how it is being distributed, it is also important, because the balance growth we talk about, and then the growth takes place where financing is made available. If we look at tourism and construction sector, these two together is constituting almost about 50% of the credit. And these two sectors were the worst hit during the pandemic. The construction sector was almost I won't say at halt. Certain components were going on, but especially on the private sector, construction housing sector was very badly affected, and tourism sector was almost at halt. Therefore, the credit creations that happens in the private sector came down during this period, because there was no fresh credit requirement in this sector so much. But earlier, whatever was there, it remained with them, and then that is why the percentage is coming being shown quite high. Next session, please. Next one, please. Now, if you look at it, the decline in the credit growth, in the domestic credit growth, was 8.2% in 2022, and it came down to 5.5% came down by 5.5% in 2021. This was the decline that had happened. And credit growth of non-banking FIs fell by 7%, whereas, of course, the banking is very marginal decline only, but other FIs had really come down, like RICB, the pension fund and all that. And as a part, but RMA has been very mindful when this decline had taken place. RMA wanted to boost the economic growth through the monetary measures, and even reduce the CRR requirement, because there's a cash reserve requirement, we call it in the banking systems. And then these regulatory, there is SLR and CRRs. It's the cash reserve every banks will have to keep from their deposits, and that has been now brought down to 7%. And SLR is around 20%. It used to be, this CRR used to be higher before. So, and then again, the MLR, they call it, that is the minimum lending rate, the minimum interest rate put in by as a benchmark by RMA, used to be 7.16% till December 21, but it is brought down to 6.92% in June 2022, which means banks can loan their fund to the private sector anything above this MLR rate. This MLR basically is calculated, I'm sure it is normally it's being calculated based on the cost of fund and the administrative fund, which is the minimum that the banks will have to cover. And beyond that, they can compromise the margin, profit margin, and make the fund available. Now, right now, because of this, the cost of fund for the private sector is likely to come down slightly, and that would facilitate more credit growth to the private sector, and that should help the private sector growth, and that should also help the economy in terms of making more investment into the productive assets. Next slide, please. Now, although the measures, some of the measures or the MLR rate, CRR, these are being reduced to facilitate the loan fund for the private sector, but it all depends on what is the position of liquidity with the financial institutions. Now, if we check the liquidity trend in 15 to 2022, in this post-pandemic period, the liquidity position is one of the highest. Now, banks put together, I think they have around 35 billion of liquidity fund that they have with them. A liquidity would mean the amount of money that the banks have right now, which is in excess of what they had loaned or they have received. So they have more money at this stage, and they should be able to finance more loans and should be able to facilitate the growth through making the credit available. Now they also have a better chances because the MLR rate is also reduced and CRR is also reduced, and because of that, they should be able to do that. But however, this having fund is one thing. The other thing is finding a meaningful projects to finance is another. Now, from the private sector, what are the meaningful projects, economically viable projects that they place on the table of the financing institutions is very important. If just because they have the liquidity positions, they will not be able to finance all the projects because they have to be mindful about their own payback also. And as we see, there's a high NPL in the financial systems in Bhutan. The NPL non-performing asset is that component is very, very high. Right now, I think RMA has even restricted some of the institutions from temporarily and restricted their loan creations or the credit creations like RICV, BDBL, because their NPL has been very, very high. Now, the reasons why this NPL, this non-performing asset, now non-performing loan, when we say that these loans are not paid back by those borrowers on time, and when they don't pay, this put into a non-performing asset, they call it. And then this non-performing asset, when they have very high, the bank is at a risk. Depositors are also at a risk. Therefore, in order to protect the interest of the banks and ultimately of the depositors, the RMA has to come up with some kind of restructuring or regulatory systems so that NPL issues are addressed. And Shoaib? Hello. We have some kind of issues with this. Yeah, my slides are gone, but okay. I will.
Farka, there is some kind of disruption in internet right now, so I hope it will be fine. Is it the
yeah,
slide?
you can go straight down, and I was discussing on the issues of credit creations, and we can go down, still down, and yeah, next slide. I think something is a slide giving a little bit of problem after these slides. I don't know why. Please go down again. Yeah. Okay. Now, in order to help the economy, one of the issues that people look at in looking for a loan fund is also the interest rate. Everybody says that in the regions we are one of the highest in terms of the cost of fund made available for development. But with the MLR going down less than 7% now, and banks competing each other, they have narrowed down that spread. Spread is the difference between the deposit interest rate and the lending interest rate. Now, there was a time when banks used to make very handsome spread, about 7-8%. They used to lend around 13%, 14%, 15%, and they used to pay only about 8%, 9% as the interest. Today, the lending rate has come down, average rate has come down to about 10.5%, whereas the deposits fund would be around 5 something. So there is only about 5% margin or 5% spread. So that has narrowed down. And when I looked at the regional spread also, in the average spread in the SAARC countries, we match with the SAARC countries average now. So we are very similar to what the regional average is in terms of maintaining the spread. But compared with other countries in the outside in the other countries of similar natures and in the developed countries, our spread is still high and our lending rates are still high. So that would have some kind of impact on the cost of fund. Now today, if you look at it, our overall lending rate average is coming to about 10.6%. And then our cost of fund, that is the deposit rate, is coming to about 5.3, 5.2%. So the difference between these two is the spread and then South Asia reported to have an average of 5.39 in 2021. That was the spread. And ours is also very similar now, 10.6 minus 5.2. So we are very similar to what the region is having that. But there was time in, like, if you look at 15, December 15, the lending rate was around, average was 14, whereas our cost of fund was, or the deposit rate was much lower. The cost of fund was 4.8. So those are the periods before 2015. If you look at it, the spread was very high. But after the introductions of, I think, 16, 17, the introductions of MLR, the interest spread has come down and lending rates has also come down. So the investment for the private sector becomes less costly now. That encourages private sector to come up with more projects and demand for more credit. The only important thing, as I mentioned, it is whether the private sector finds good projects that would self-finance and whether they would qualify for loans that would be, reasonably be having good internal rate of return and good payback period. Next slide, please. Hello. Mm-hmm. Are you moving the slides down or playing the slides? Shoaib? Hello.
Yes. Now I just moving the slides down. I can see the non-performing loans slide. Do you want to show this slide?
Now, when we look at it, you see the non-performing loans, according to norms, anything less than 5% should be quite acceptable. But the thing is here is the non-performing loan in the recent years has been very alarming. Now we had 16%. Now it has come down a little bit, but it's still 14% And then this non-performing loan is, what it would basically would mean is that loans that is not the loan that is due for payment to the banks divided by the total loans that is being taken, total exposure. So this loan NPL is very high in this present context. And as tourism sector also happened to be the one of the leading, in fact, in the top two bracket of the loan takers, the NPL in this sector is also very, very high. So NPL is quite a issue right now in the country. So we need to be careful, and RMA has come up with a lot of policy issues in order to check on this NPL or how to adjust this NPL. Next slide, please. Can we play the slides to really move the slide like this? Or okay. Now, if you look at the overall NPL ratio from 2008 to 2019 in the regions, you can see Afghanistan is a very high one. But other than that, now these small bars, of course, I just copied this graph from the data source, so it is quite invisible. But if you look at the NPL rates, it is very close to the overall average had remained close to about 7-8%. And up to 2029. But in 2021-22, we are much ahead, we are much further than this regional average. But in the 2021, even the region, the NPL was also quite high. But it will be, I think, stabilizing post-COVID. And if it continues with the high NPL, is going to be a problem for the financial institutions, for the banks to continue creating their loan, because it will have a lot of restrictions as NPL goes up. The NPL is going to be a very risky factor for the banks because it puts them into a risk, and it is and not only at a risk, but they will also not have sufficient fund because the fund will have to come back for them to create fresh loans. So NPL issues will have to be addressed, and we are right now a little ahead of the region, of course, except I think Afghanistan. Next slide. Yeah, you can move the slide. Now, there are I will be talking a little more on the issues of foreign exchange and FDI issues, that how do we look at our future. The reasons for our forex impact is, as we say, basically it is the current account deficit that eats into the foreign currency reserves. Because when we have a current account deficit, which means export not growing at the same rate as import, then we have that deficit, current account deficit. And then we have to also meet some of it through our own foreign exchange reserves. And that's one of the reasons why we have eaten into our foreign currency reserves. And the other issues that we have is also the internal informal exchange rate with INR and the risk of loss of confidence in neutrum. This is another issue that we have to address too. Now, I think the RMS, the government's norm on receiving all export payments in foreign currency is a very good move, I guess. Very recently it's being introduced. Otherwise, a lot of export also used to be facilitated through the neutrum that goes out through informal channel, and this informal channel, it was beyond our accounting systems, and we didn't have the record. And it's also difficult to know whether it is for the business, approved business, or something, a black business also could be happening, and currency crossing the border and coming back through the former channel and formalizing those kind of illegal businesses also could be taking place. Now, with the recent introductions of policy wherein all exports will have to be paid in foreign currency, and that is a very good move, I guess, and that should help us at least to transparently account for all our export receipts. Otherwise, the issue of not knowing what was the exact amount of export through the foreign exchange earning was not possible. Now, other issue or the challenge that we have post-COVID in the from that would be impacted by the from the monetary side, the variables impacted to the monetary side would be there is no new investment generating foreign exchange earning have been identified, because it's now we cannot continue relying on the hydro sector alone, as discussed in the earlier section. Also, now our earning from other sectors in the foreign exchange will have to go up. We cannot simply depend on hydropower, tourism, and also some remittance happening, but we have to identify non areas other than these areas, so that our foreign exchange could go up. And then that would call for our regional integrations and finding uh, uh, our niche products for export. Trend indicates that there has been a significant increase in the imports in the past without corresponding inflow, which means we were not really having the growth in the inflow, that our export was not increasing, whereas import was still increasing. So that has also created the problem for foreign exchange. And the other one, as Dr. Dhakal, I think I have seen in his comment in our earlier uh, discussions, when somebody asked the questions on about the inflation, that he mentioned our pegged currency with India is also one of the reasons for inflation. That was what he mentioned in that. But this is a issue that we need to it is important for discussions. Of course, we know there are disadvantages, but we have more advantages of having the currency pegged at this stage, because we are import driven, and then not having the currency pegged and devaluing our currency would simply increase our cost. That's what I would think. Because if you have the options of reducing import and substituting with your indigenous products, then probably that would be a different issue. But at this stage, I think the pegged currency is at our advantage. And we are not really able to see that direct foreign direct investment growth in the last few years, and this is also, I think, the hope post-COVID the things would change, but at least from the grants inflow and all that, we really do not see much growth, because we are also graduating from our LDC status. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next? Now, I think tourism and export was either, because these are the very hardly hit industries, and during this difficult time, the only foreign reserves that inflow that happened was from the grants and some loans and hydropower receipts that also went, and hydropower receipts also had gone down. So these were the only these things. But now, to move forward, what we might have to do is RMA. Now you see some of the moves that RMA has already taken, which is, in my view, is very good, is on the RMA allowing non-resident Bhutanese to open foreign currency, or both in nil term also, which was not there in the past. And very recently, in September 22, they announced that anybody working outside or earning money outside could open foreign currency accounts and deposit there. Now, even without that, also there was some encouragement. Like if people were working and no through, they were remitting the earning from here to the country, were given about, I think, 1% motivational uh, schemes was there. 1% was given to them as a motivations for remitting. Now, with these kind of strategies, I think the inflow of foreign currency from the remittance side would be going up. And also, they have also allowed the tourism, tour operators, those who are certified, can also have a foreign currency account. Now, one of the reasons why this foreign currency was also not properly accounted was because people were quite reluctant in quite a number of cases for depositing the foreign currency to the RMA, and there used to be some kind of informal trade happening. Now, with this, the proper accounting also would be there, and encouragement for people would also be there. The other thing that would help in the foreign exchange improvement systems or reserve improvement system would be the recent tourism policy, I guess. Now, in the new tourism policy, there is a mixed feeling. Now, in tourism, high value, low volume tourism, with a lot of new policies coming up. Obviously, post COVID, there will be an improvement because during the COVID, there was almost nil. Now, whether this new policy would be very fruitful or impactful would yet to be tested. Some, of course, I myself wouldn't be really comfortable to give my judgment on this one, because now with increase in the sustainable fund, sustainable development fund that we call it, the every foreign tourist will have to pay in $200 and then also meet the other cost through the tour operators. And we have also put in about 1,200 new rupees for the regional tourist, like the Indian tourist. And with that one, I think this is the what it means is the increase in the price for the visitors, and it has both. You cannot say increasing price will suddenly reduce the demand. Also, you cannot conclude like that. Because once sometimes it helps depending on what the economists would say, elasticity of services, price elasticity of services or the product, which we have not tested. It might help, or it may be counterproductive, yet to be tested. But obviously, the easiness or the systems and the quality and the services that had been identified are much better this time through this new policy. Therefore, and also tourism distribution, that regional distribution, sustainability components were well addressed. So that, in my view, in the long terms would be helpful in increasing the foreign exchange through the tourism sector. The other important policy
move fast, a
that
little faster. Yeah,
came up was on the control of imports, because government has put in right now, which was overdue in my view, control on some of the restrictions on the import of non-essential items and comfort assets, which was, in my view, was overdue. That was really draining up the major component of our foreign exchange. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, next.
We need to move a little fast, yeah?
Now, you see, through the monetary variables, we have also seen that inflation component, as we say, and somebody was asking the questions, this has gone up very high, and gradually it is likely to come down. Our forecasts say that it's coming down and will come down to 5.5 in 2013, and probably lower than that in the future, as we will start production would be more picking up in the near future. Let's go to the next. I think there is quite a number of issues would be discussed there, but if we compare the inflation with the GDP growth, and then the trend that the forecast trend that have done with the small dotted lines, our inflation would still be, now if you look at the red line, it would be crossing the GDP growth. It looks like the inflation movement would be, or inflation would be a little higher than the GDP growth. And if economy is increasing around 4.5% in medium term, then inflation is going beyond that as 5.5%. So it would be better if we could control and bring it at least to the similar level, which may be more productive in the overall sense. But inflation, it may take some time to control. Next slide, please. Now, let's move forward. I think the slide is taking time, but I would now simply go on giving my verbal talk. The inflation, in fact, most of the inflation in Bhutan is basically because of the food prices. In the recent time, the food prices has really gone up. If you look at the rate, the food price was really, really high. And then we needed to import most of the food from outside. That's why our inflation would not difficult to control food. That's what I was talking about. The walk-in inflation or the borrowed inflations happens quite a lot, substantial in Bhutan. Next slide, please. And this is going to continue. And this might continue in the medium term also, because we will not be able to produce enough food for ourselves. Now, if you look at the inflation comparatively in the region, Pakistan is quite high compared to other countries are quite close by, except Maldives is quite under control, but rest of the countries in the regions are quite close by. But Pakistan is quite distinct in terms of the inflationary problem in the recent history, and likely to still continue as a leading nations with inflations. Let's move the next. The regions, if we need, then we can discuss that at a later stage. I have already, one of the problems of the inflation, as we all know, is it will erode the purchasing power, and it will have an impact because the goods become expensive. It will hurt the poor very badly. And then our inflation, 60% of the inflation, 60% of our inflation is coming from the food prices. Therefore, it is going, if the inflation is not controlled, it will have a lot of impact. But it is going to ease, and I said that RMA says the upper tolerance limit for inflation is 5%, but we are likely to be at slightly above 5% in the medium term. Let's move to the next. I don't like to go through these causes of inflation that is in Bhutan. Everyone, I think, knows that because it's the pandemic period. There was a lot of monetary stimulus provided, and energy price went up because of this war, and currency pegged, and then food price, because 60% of our import is coming through the food. So these are some of the causes that explain the inflation in Bhutan. But the forecast, our RMA forecast, after a couple of years, it says that it will come down to around 3.5 to 4%, which is under control, below the tolerance level. Let's move next. I think I would like this to be moved a little faster so that I can also conclude now. Let's go there, because RMA has taken a lot of policy measures. In fact, they have, during the pandemic, to address these issues, they have also taken, in order to help the economic growth, they took the measures into 4 phases. And all 3, now the 4th phase is also now in place. And this is basically done in a targeted phase in order to address the monetary issues and NPL issues. I think we'll move to the next also. Let's. I'm sure the participants, mostly witness, can look into what are the policy issues or some of the interventions RMA has taken in terms of stabilizing the post and during the pandemic and the post-pandemic. and which are the areas they have targeted in terms of maintaining or helping the economy like growth. Now, if you look at it now in the fourth phase, uh, the support of economic recovery process into end-to-end credit system address of the impacted areas or the impacted borrowers. How do we address to addressing to the NPL issues? So these are some of the things, but private sector were really looked into during this difficult period through non-capitalization of interest and deferment of loan payment and waiver of 50% of the interest. So a lot of measures were taken to help this pandemic period, and gradually it is being phased out. Therefore, the cost to the nation is also going to be reduced post these things, and that will help build our or narrow down our current account deficit also. Let's move to next. And there are few issues in terms of protecting the NPL. If you say the through the RMA, the capital adequacy ratio, what we call the capital adequacy, I don't have enough time to explain what it would mean, but there are a lot of technical terms called tier 1 capital, tier 2 capital, and all those kinds. I don't want to get into that, but the regulatory requirement is the banks will have to maintain it. They used to maintain 10% CAR, but now they'll have to maintain all the time. They used to maintain about 3% of the core capital adequacy ratio, which means the first, the core capital would mean the bank's capital, paid up capital plus reserves only, not included others. And they have to maintain 5% all the time. Now, all financial institutions will have to maintain 5% of their leverage ratio all the time. So these are the strict measures that would help us in terms of controlling the growing NPL. That NPL was growing, and then this will help, I think, controlling NPL, because then bank will have to also, this will also help protecting the interest of the depositors, because banks, as we know, about 90% of the availability of the fund is through the depositors' money, and the shareholders' money is only about 10%. Therefore, here we are saying they cannot go on creating the loan all the time without looking at the shareholders' capital, because they cannot be let free. In the good times, they make good profit, whereas if it's a difficult time, there is the depositors would lose the money. So that protection is also provided by the RMA's recent policy quite strongly. Let's go to the next. Now, what I would like to conclude, sir, here is with post-COVID situations from the monetary side. We always see that our foreign exchange reserves will improve once hydro export increases, tourism reopens, and then remittance continues, and we start identifying other areas of export. And this situation is going to help us. And the private investment is going to pick up because of the we have a good liquidity situations, and deficit financing situations is going to be there, but the liquidity positions of the banks is quite strong enough to finance some component, domestic deficit financing component, and also is finance the private sector. So post-COVID, I think as the fuel price comes down, the supply chain disruptions was one of the reasons why we were heavily impacted. That gets improved. The private sector investment picks up. So these all would help us in the growth. So we see potentials for the growth in the future if these policies are practiced with sincerity and monitored well in terms of ground reality. Next slide, please. No, no, you can skip these slides. Can you go to the next, please? One of the challenges that we can see from the furniture side is our financing of projects. Of course, we see prospects for private sector growth from other variables, but it's still the collateral-based financing as against the project-based financing is one of the challenges, because project-based financing has not really picked up well, because we are still heavily collateral-based financing is being done, because banks very risk averse. But when we say that, they also need to be mindful about high NPL. I don't know which would be correct, to accept certain level of NPL, continue project-based financing, or go by collateral financing and protect the bank's interest. But there are pros and cons on each of these. But very high NPL, especially in the construction and tourism sectors and manufacturing sector, these are a little difficult. And the other challenge we see is the post-COVID period. Now, once the loan that asset quality is going to be a little bit of problem, because now once the RME starts addressing to this high NPL, that is something called forbearance, closures will have to be done. Many of the cases could go to the court, and then mortgage properties could be seized, and auctions and value, the deteriorations in the value, so that will bring in some kind of shock to the market in terms of value deteriorations in the assets. So asset quality impact probably may be failed unless we really address with the because this, after this partial interest waiver is out, and then loan deferment phase is out, then the pressure would be there on the borrowers, and then banks will be after them, and there would be a need for legal closure of the cases. That would create a problem that time. I think this is one of the areas of concerns in the post-COVID periods. Can we go to the next, please? So need for restructuring of the distressed loan would be there. And that's what I said, real assets and construction equipment and construction, like that hotel facilities and all that, could have impact, and the owners will have the impact in the post COVID phase, as the some of the measures are the facilitating measures and loan recovery measures start, the facility measures stops, that loan deferment, everything, interest payment, these facilities provided at this stage, they will stop, and then this could be the result, and this will be the challenges for the economies. Next, please. Now, the last slide, I was just trying to show a little bit link. How can now, after having discussed on the fiscal and the monetary policies, now a little bit on how do we, Bhutan or any country, through the stronger regional economic integrations, benefit each other. And that was also the one of the issues, I think Mr. Ranjan Sharma has inquired that time, and we need to discuss on these at a in a specific issues at a platform that is created among the regional countries. Now, we see that the Bhutanese economy is very strongly integrated with Indian economics. However, and then with Bangladesh, Nepal, and Thailand, these are the other countries where we do the business, and beside India. But there are areas where economy can be integrated further. And then rather than, again, the countries will believe in moving towards interdependence rather than creating yourself a dependency on the economy. So if you are completely import driven, then you are more dependent. But if you are also coming up with baskets of goods that can be supplied or then exported, then you will be becoming interdependent. Therefore, we have to find our own niche areas where we can address to this. And every country will have certain strength in certain areas and certain products. And then we see, of course, every country would have identified. Bhutan also has identified, I'm sure, have identified certain areas like horticulture, beside tourism and hydropower, like issues like horticulture, some of the mining stuffs and all that. We have identified some of the, we call it the five jewels, and within that, that a lot of areas. But uh, how do we really exploit on those areas, the potential areas, and bring the products into the market? We have to work on facilitating mechanisms, marketing mechanisms, and transportation mechanisms, and also the cooperation among the regional countries, so that the movement of goods, movement of people become easier and faster. Today we see, of course, we have a lot of agreements here and there, but bringing goods from one country to another is still facing those kind of issues are being faced. So these are some of the issues that discussions among the regional countries, that platform, a creation of the platform and discussions on this. Therefore, the movement of goods becomes easier. I can see, because I, as an have worked in the corporate sector for long enough, and worked in some of the boards, and then came in from the Bhutanese experience also. We know that uh, especially when you are working with the high volume, low value goods transportations, and crossing one country and then going to the another country, then from the government to government, there's a perfect understanding. But there are also local chapters, the local politics, the these things really matter in terms of transportations, and then that will slow down the process, that will hike the cost and make the products incompetitive, or would not be able to generate the potential revenue because of all those kind of hiccups. And these are some of the areas that regionally, if we need to cooperate, and if we have to integrate further and stronger, is to soften or iron out this kind of issues. And then I think every one of us will be benefiting. In fact, in the regions, we have a lot of common problems and common economic and non-economic issues that through the economic integrations we'll be able to solve. And South Asia is a hub for uh, intellectual capacity. However, we have to work and then improve on our educational quality and address to poverty. Poverty is one issue that all of us are facing. In fact, uh, I have also seen data where some of us in the country, our poverty is as high as 49-50%, also, like if I mentioned here, Afghanistan, and we are around hovering around 20-25% in most of the countries. And this is one area through the proper economic integrations. And if we benefit and exploit our economic potential better, I think we will be able to address these issues more better than what it is to be in the past. And uh, the last slide, I think, should, I don't know how much it would be of use to uh, Dr. Dhakal, but I would put this way. Now, to conclude, I think from the overall general this presentations, from the first sessions to the last, I see that the GDP growth would be gradual in the medium term and may pick up a little faster. Our reliance on hydro in the long run would be less, but in the medium term, our revenue would still be from the hydro sector. And inflation and non-inflation issues continue to be modest in the long term. The unemployment component would still be there. Foreign exchange or the foreign currency situations is likely to help. All the trade, balance of trade, current account deficit, and deficit financing situations will improve, and that will signal the economic confidence in the country. And gradually, the economic situations will pick up. It won't be, I wouldn't see immediately in the very like in economic recovery in Thailand happened to be quite fast, and even the Maldives happened to be little faster than what we are. But 1 or 2 years post COVID, I think where it's more likely that will be quite gradual, because to pick up to the 2029 level of GDP, another 3 to 4 years would be lost. It's not only in the terms of absolute value, it will be 4 years lost, but if you look at the time value of money, it will be much more than that. Therefore, for Bhutan to reach to its 2029 level and to reach to the level where it would have reached otherwise is a big challenge. With this, I conclude my presentations and open for discussion. Thank you, sir. You can take the floor now.
Thank you, Damar. Sorry, we thought we would have more time left. I want to allow you, to complete your presentation, so that whatever hard work you are put in would not be gone waste. And certainly, it's been very extensive, very comprehensive. Now I know it's 1:05, unfortunately, but we can extend a little bit if people have questions. Anyone want to ask questions? Please, this is the time. If you can bear with us for another 10-15 minutes, if it would be good to engage in short discussions here. Anybody, please raise your hands. Or are you too hungry? No? If not, maybe they are thinking about it. There was a question, sorry. Oh, there is a question from MFA, Bhutan. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So you had, it was very interesting for me to note with regard to this foreign remittance being as high as, tourism revenue in terms of percentage to the GDP. And while commending the RMA for the recent policies in terms of foreign currency banking policies, informally, what I have gathered is that it has its own limitations. So I don't know whether, while they have increased the percentage from 0.4 to 1%, there are certain limitations. So I just wanted to ask Sir Dumbo here, I don't know whether you're aware of those limitations, or I'm also not too well aware of all the limitations, but what would be more ideal? Because I feel like foreign remittance is one area where foreign ministry also could play a role in encouraging such kind of things. But what do you think would be a little more ideal banking policy to encourage foreign remittances? Because I understand the limitations are discouraging some of the Bhutanese to remit their foreign currencies. Thank you.
Dumbar, yeah.
Well, one of the things that we RMA, of course, they have understood this. This remittance, despite the fact that more and more people are going out post-COVID, whether the remittance would increase in the similar fashions in tandem with the number of people going out, probably had been the concern, I guess. And in doing that, we need to come up with a motivating factor, because right now, if you earn foreign exchange, then you put in back to the RMA and later on you need it back, it would be quite restrictive, I guess. Now RMA is softening that restrictive policy, wherein if you have earned the foreign currency and you are allowed to open the foreign currency account, I'm sure they would also be allowing them to withdraw certain component of it when they require. So if that facilitations is there, I'm sure most of the money earned in the foreign countries will come back to the country. The overall, of course, if we went with the past policy of you earn, you deposit, and after that you would get only that $3,000 per year limit would be applicable to everybody, irrespective of whether you have contributed or not. I think if we look into that policy and say, if you have earned and brought in, certain percentage would be allowed for you to withdraw when you need it. If that policy comes up, I think the people working abroad would be more encouraged to bring in the foreign currency back home. And again, we need to also understand in the foreign countries, the investment possibility for them is more liberal. And then we don't want our nationals to, of course, go and, of course, investing outside is good from the economic point of view, but looking at the foreign currency reserves and the need to increase right now, rather than encouraging them to invest outside, is better to bring in and then provide them some facility to withdraw certain percentage as and when they need.
Thank you, Dumber. Very, very interesting response. I think, I tend to agree with that, because there may be a tendency for people, if they cannot easily utilize their saved money, then they may limit their sending back and invest outside. Kezang, please, Kezang, Bhutan, you please ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful session, very educative. First, I would like to comment on the earlier question and seek some clarification from Dr. Dumber. My sense is, I think a lot of the foreign remittances are going into the construction sector, largely, buying land and buildings and, but through economic diplomacy, where Sri Lanka is placed right now, I think we can encourage non-resident Bhutanese to look into our entrepreneurship ecosystem, where we have opportunities for NRBs to invest in business ideas through creating enabling conditions for NRBs, including red carpeting, providing them easy, conducive processes for investments in businesses in the country. So that's where I would seek Dr. Dumber's thoughts. Number two, I had put on the chat, how would, if at all, unpegging Ngultram from INR impact our macroeconomic situation? Specifically, I still fail to, not being an economist, fail to connect the two. Of course, when the inflation goes higher in India, because we're pegged, it goes high. But by unpegging, how would we be shielded? So that's the second part of my question, sir. And the third one is, I was wondering if you would get a copy of the presentation, just by way of reference. Thank you, sir.
Oh, you must welcome, Kezang. Happy to have these questions. And let me start addressing from the last one. Yeah, last in, first out.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The presentation slides are available, and then the facilitators, the organizers will make it available to you if you request them, because I have got no restriction on that. So, and even otherwise, as a good friend of mine, I can personally also send it to you. Don't worry about that.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Kharka, we have already uploaded the presentation on Zoom. I request all our participants to download the presentations from.
And the second question is very important for me as a political candidate, and my good wishes for you to be successful and form the government next. But please do not play with the exchange pegging history. Because the kind of, if we play with this one, obviously in real economics, when people say that you devalue your currency, let it be determined by the market. Your import export proportions will automatically determine the right value of your currency, and that would be useful. That is let the market forces operate in that. I would not agree with this. Of course, I am believe in myself that I'm a free economist, but in certain areas you have to be restrictive in your mind. Now we have to assess our own economic situations by letting out. Now, if you remove the pegging, the only way is our currency's value would be little lower, obviously. Even during the pegging also, informal sector you have seen, in the informal market, like in the border town, our currency is trading at about 10% lower than the INR. Now, no, the pegging goes away. What happens is we are an import driven country, and we about our trade with India, as you know, is 82%, and then huge lot we import from India. The pegging would removing the pegging would devalue our currency, which means in terms of our currency we will spend more money as to facilitate our import than what we are doing right now. And that would be impactful to us. And also now you see, when we pay the loan, most of our public debt, as I was explaining, that huge public debt, over close to 70% of our public debt is INR denominated debt. Now paying that with the after removing the peg, and if our currency goes down, then we'll end up paying more money.
Much more, yes.
So that way, I would see that keeping the peg is useful for us right now, and maybe for some more years to come in future also.
Thank you.
Your first question, I think your first question was, I've forgotten also.
The first question was on, I also forgot it. I didn't know.
Economic, would economic enhance improving economic diplomacy and creating other investment areas besides just.
Yeah. For the remittance, right? For the remittance.
Yes, sir.
Now I remember the word red carpet for the right, red carpet for those NBIs, non-resident NRB, you know, for identifying the investment avenue and putting the money into investment. Because right now what they're doing is they're simply buying houses, buying lands, and inflating the housing price and land price in Thimphu. And why couldn't they put the money into other business area? Well. Yeah. This is one area, but the investors, NRBs, they will use the similar kind of logic as we do inside the country. They will also see where my money multiplies faster. And they have also seen that if I put in the land right now, land, I don't know, because the prices are doubling up every 3-4 years. So they still see that as a more profitable venture and less risk. In the business, you will lose also. Your business could be, very risky because it would be loss making. There is nobody to manage. If they are outside, management becomes a problem, trust becomes a problem. But with the land, it remains there. The only thing is price shoots up, and then when they go back home, they can sell in 3 times the price or build a house. So probably they will continue with the land at this stage so long the land is available, or for those of us who are staying inside and we competing with them, they would get the first preference and we will get the residuals, peripheral land only.
Thank you. Thank you, Damer. I think it's unless somebody has a very, very important question. Anybody? I'll give one last chance. If anybody. Mr. Hafiz, please.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Hafiz.
Yes, thank you so much. So my question was actually that as if Nepal is highly dependent on the earnings of or the revenue from the tourism sector. So the disruption in tourism sector, did it cause any harm to the national economy that the Nepal is going through right now at this moment, which actually in a multifaceted way accumulated some other related problems. So and if so what would be the strategy for Nepal to go for diversifying the revenue stream? Thank you.
Um, you got your Dumbar, you've got the question right?
I got sure, sir, but I don't have a ready-made answer because his question is pertaining to Nepal. I'm not very professional with the, of course, the uh, percentage of tourism income as a percentage of GDP in Nepal is also quite noticeable, but I
Very high.
cannot
High.
say what are the other problems because I'll have to do more research on this area if I have to answer for the issues related to Nepal.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. I think, my own feeling, or rather observation is that Nepal is far a better place than Bhutan in terms of manufacturing sector, I think they can do, far better in that area. So, instead of concentrating in tourism, perhaps, looking at possible expansion of the manufacturing sector, including research. Also in Bhutan, today we didn't have enough time to talk about the services. Although tourism is a service, and we touched on it, important one. But perhaps we'll have other opportunities to think about, talk on that. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Bhandari, would you mind? Mr. Kewal wants to ask
yes.
question. Mr. Kewal.
Anything? Sorry.
Yeah, may I
Anybody?
speak, please?
Oh yeah, please. Sorry. Final question.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Achutla. This question goes to Dr. Damba. Dr. Damba, in his presentation, I remember I was talking about Australian exodus. So quickly, straightforward question to Doctor: what could be the reason of exodus to Australia right after COVID-19? If you could share some of your findings, Doctor, that would be very enlightening to all of us, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Very straight answer here is there's a backlog, and during the pandemic, people could not go out, mobility restrictions. So it is not, and it's obviously that for 3-4 when people have there's a stock of 2-3 years of people not being able to go, and suddenly when it gets opened, then there is a movement all at a lot, and 1 or 2 years this to clear this backlog would be there. Then after that, I think it will be smoothing. And obviously the reasons of people going to Australia or Canada is a green pasture. They can study, they can work, and they can sponsor their studies, and during the studies itself they can take their life partner, work there full time, make some money, and after studies they can work a couple of years, come back home, and they will have some asset added to that, which may not be possible if they are staying home and then doing the kind of services that they are doing right now. So it is basically the economic reasons.
Thank you, Damar. And thank you, first, Dr. Damar Kharka is actually on holiday. He's in Australia, and I have to thank him, especially for taking his time off from his, leisure to come and give a talk to us, which has been wonderful, very, very, very well organized, and he's covered, I guess, 90-95% of the issues that we face at the moment, and I hope that our participants have benefited from it. I also would like to thank Sanem Dhaka, especially Shoaib, for arranging this and arranging the teleconference, and it's been my pleasure to coordinate it from Thimphu, Bhutan, and I don't want to sort of sum it up because it needs a lot of time to do it. I mean, although I can do it, we are running out of time, taking people's time out of their lunch time here in Bhutan. But I think, in short, it's the picture for Bhutan, as I get it from Damar Kharka, is not too bad. There are difficulties in the short couple of years, but if we do the right thing, we should be able to come back to the growth trajectory that we had few years back. The main problem is the dwindling foreign direct investment, the high debt GDP debt ratio, then the budget deficit. These are the issues that need to be addressed, and along with that, I think creating an enabling environment for private sector development and growth, so that exports can grow and can flow into the BIMSTEC region and beyond, and help Bhutan to integrate better in the region. I think that is the sort of a message that we get, and I'm sure we'll have opportunities to continue these sort of discussions in some other forums in the future. Thank you, everybody, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
seeing you, Rajan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think we should keep in touch, Dr. Bhandari. Yeah, it's a really long time.
Right.
Nepal is undergoing a lot of strategies on exports. The European Union has been giving a lot of
Good.
putting on a lot of effort to increase exports. So the same experience could be shared with Bhutan.
Right.
We are coming up with a new technological, 4.0 technology methodology as well, and which, I think Bhutan is much more in a higher position than Nepal, because, automation, innovation, digitalization, and environment, taking it together for preparing for future is that technology 4.0 is a very good concept. So I think, we can share a lot of ideas together and then see how exports can be increased first through the region itself. But my gut feeling is that, we have always done programs scattered, and then, we've done it with government or with private sector alone, but we want the government and the private sector of all the 4 countries, all the SAARC countries to be together in a big hall, sit down together, identify the right person, who can bring about changes, and then you work as a change agent to make things happen. I think that
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more.
Because we've been talking much and nothing much has been happening. So I think, now the time has come to take action. And COVID has taught us a lot of lessons, and then we can move forward.
Let's be in touch. Good seeing you.
Let's be in touch.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone from Bhutan.
Thank
Thank you, Dr. Dambar. Thank you, Achut sir. Thank you, Sohaib. Thanks, everyone. It was a very big learning experience.
If you, Rajan, tomorrow we have a session in case you are interested.
Tomorrow there is another session parallelly going on with Sauti, another one. So I think I'll have to speak.
Yeah, I was in Sauti the other day on the BIMSTEC trade and connectivity document the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see if I can. I will definitely connect tomorrow also. So if send me the links. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Shoaib. Bye, Dambar.
Bye.
Bye, sir. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Dambar. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.